Hello and welcome to the presentation on Unifying the Global Economy, the use of a single global currency. I am William Ballweg, the creator and presenter. Let's begin. To start, the idea of a single global currency was first introduced in 1848 from John Stuart Mill, as you can see from the quote here. International trade is something that has been occurring for over 2,500 years on our planet. So the idea of trade with other countries is not new, and using a single currency for this trade is not a new idea either. What is happening currently in our modern times is that the world is shrinking as individual countries, their economies are growing. This has created a system of intertwined economies of all nations that has truly created a global scale economy. With this global scale economy, there is a collective push towards one global currency. Organizations like the International Monetary Fund and Central Banking System and certain governments throughout the world have been making this push. This trend is also supported by the 120 members of the International Financial Reporting Standards, which is a collective effort towards unifying accounting standards across the globe. But the use of a global currency, single global currency, many people ask why? Why would we want to do such a thing? Well, to start answering that question, we will look into the benefits of a single global currency. The first benefit would be increasing the world's financial assets by $36 trillion. In 2004, the International Monetary Fund estimated the total value of the financial assets of the world to be $144 trillion. Or this is roughly 3.5 times the world's GDP. Now, if we were to issue a single global currency for all to use, the average multiplier for this would be about 4. What this means is that the world's financial assets have now increased to $180 trillion, which is an increase of $36 trillion. This same multiplier could also be put towards the GDP of the world, which would be an estimated increase of $9 trillion. Moving on, another wonderful benefit of the use of a single global currency would be reducing the cost of international trade. Currently, there are 147 different currencies used by the 192 member nations of the United Nations. What this results in is an estimated annual cost of $400 billion just due simply to the different values of all the different currencies. By issuing a single global currency, this annual cost would be completely eliminated because there would be no need to trade values of currencies anymore. Another wonderful benefit would be the elimination of seigniorage. Now, seigniorage can mean a few different things, but for the sake of this discussion, we're going to look at seigniorage on the international trade level. Seigniorage is created whenever a nation sells goods to another nation and receives payment in that foreign nation's currency. Now, what happens is that foreign nation's currency could carry a higher value than the country who sold the goods to them. This results in an immediate economic boost by accepting payment in a higher valued currency. Many economists and experts argue that this is an artificial inflation of the true value of the goods, and by issuing a single global currency, this artificial inflation would no longer occur. The last benefit would be reducing debt by eliminating the currency fluctuations. Up until 1971, there was a system called the Bretton Woods system that regulated the value of currencies throughout the world. In 1971, the system ceased to exist, and the result was wild fluctuations annually in the value of the various different currencies of the world. Now, between 1999 and 2001, 97% of all debt was placed in just 5 currencies of the world, which was the US dollar, the euro, the yen, the pound sterling, and the Swiss franc. By creating the system, there are 2 dilemmas that are created. First, a country in which wants to borrow to finance their own operations has to borrow in one of these 5 currencies, which typically carries a higher value than their own currency. So they're at an economic disadvantage right from the get-go because they're spending more for their debt. The second dilemma, right in line with this, creates a currency mismatch. This currency mismatch could result in a sharp devaluation of the debt to the lender by that country's own currency losing value. And now the lender runs the risk of being repaid in a less valuable currency, and their debt is given at a greater risk then, or their lending is given at a greater risk. These are some of the benefits that come with the issue of a single global currency, but others would ask, what are the costs of a single global currency? To begin, I must say, it was very difficult to locate actual data-related factual costs to a single global currency. Most of these costs existed in the realms of ideas or ideology and conspiracy theories. With that in mind, though, there were a few legitimate costs that didn't require mention. The first potential cost is the abandonment of the sovereignty of money. Many nations and many people within those nations look at money as a source of national pride. Their own currency gives them pride for the country, similar to a flag. The use of a single global currency would cause this national pride to be threatened. The second and more legitimate cost, the only one that I could find in relation to actual factual numbers, is the loss of control of interest rates, money supply, or exchange rates. Many national governments think that it's best that the control of interest rates and money supply be kept to them on their own individual country's level. The use of a single global currency would now put this in the hands of a global scale, and they would lose the control they once had. Another potential cost is the increased financial responsibilities for someone. If somebody issues a single global currency, if this responsibility were to fall on an individual nation, that nation now has to take global financial considerations into account whenever they're creating policies and procedures in relation to inflation rates, interest rates, things of this nature. They have to take the world into consideration now. The last potential cost, one that kind of exists within the realm of conspiracy theories but does have some legitimacy to it, is that the issuing a single global currency would create a financial monopoly. Basically, the entire inflation rate for the whole world would now be in the hands of a very few. Some people find this a little frightening because, historically speaking, monopolies have not benefited the masses. They tend to benefit the very few. Now, moving on, we would like to look at the effects on international industry. What would happen with the issuance of a single global currency? Well, the first one would be a major loss to the hedging industry, and this would be in the realm of currency derivatives. Basically, when international trade happens, one currency will be bought for another one. The difference of cost or value between those two currencies creates either an economic value or loss. And that just happens just from purchasing currency with a different currency. This industry would pretty much be eliminated with the issuance of a single global currency. And within this, there would be many financial experts and professionals that would lose their job, estimated around 200,000. However, these individuals are highly educated and highly skilled. With the boom that would happen with the rest of the international industry, they'd have no trouble finding employment elsewhere. Moving on to another cost, again, as we talked about, would be a loss of currency derivatives. There would no longer be the opportunity to simply make money by buying a currency that was valued at less and hoping the value goes up. This would also trigger unprecedented economic growth. This would be a wonderful benefit to industry across the globe. As discussed before, the financial assets would increase by 36 trillion estimated, and an estimated 9 trillion GDP growth. This would mean growth across businesses on an international scale. This also would be coupled with reduced transaction costs. International industries would no longer be required to purchase any form of foreign currency for international trade, which comes with a huge cost savings and increasing the benefits of international trade. This would also stabilize interest rates as well, with no risk of currency devaluation as everyone's using the same system of currency within a single global currency. Debt-related risks would drop significantly, leading to a stabilization of interest rates across the globe. Now let's look at some effects on developed nations. Truly, it would be an overall minimal effect on developed nations. In fact, only one nation really stands to lose anything significant, and that would be the United States. After World War II, the United States gained a huge economic advantage by becoming the world's reserve currency. In fact, 60% of all international trade happens within the US dollar. This gives the United States a large economic advantage over the rest of the world. By issuing a single global currency, they could stand to lose this advantage. The last effect on developed nations would be the competition that would arise for developing the single currency. There are now numerous countries that are competing with the US to become the world's reserve currency. This includes China, Russia, Brazil, India, South Africa, and of course the European Union. And in 2009, the G20 Summit of Nations announced plans to actually create and implement a single global currency to replace the United States dollar as the world's reserve currency. No real action has occurred as of yet, but what many experts are finding is that this is increasing competition amongst all these developed nations to become the country that holds the reserve currency. However, this competition is wide open. The massive debt of the US, the current failing of the euro and Brexit, and China's inflexibility towards their own financial policies leaves the door wide open for anyone to become the world's reserve currency. Now, the effects on developing nations. This is where the true and the largest effects occur within issuing a single global currency. Overall, it would have a massive effect. As you can see from the diagram right down here, the majority of the world's economic growth is in transition, less than developed, or least developed. The issuance of a single global currency and the economic boom that would happen from that could reduce the dependency that developed nations have, or developing nations have, on developed nations. It also eliminates the need for currency reserves. When a developing nation enters the international trading stage, they are required by the International Monetary Fund to hold a certain amount of currency reserves. This requires them to put a significant amount of their own financial resources in a low-yield system that ties up a lot of these finances. This would also increase the voting rights with the International Monetary Fund. The International Monetary Fund currently holds the international trading system. Each country has voting rights within these systems, but the voting rights are based off of the economic status of the country. If you increase the country's economic status, the voting rights are increased within the International Monetary Fund. Okay, in summary and conclusion of this presentation, first thing to mention is that there is a large amount of literature that exists on this subject. However, the majority of this literature is greatly skewed towards the benefits of a single global currency rather than the costs. kind of easy to see though, because the majority of the benefits that do occur by issuing a single global currency would greatly, or it carries the potential to greatly benefit all nations across the globe and international industry as well. Reduced interest rates, increased benefits within GDP growth and financial assets leads to enormous benefits for all industries. And lastly, summarizing and concluding, this seems to be the direction that the world is heading. This issuance and implementation of a single global currency is on the horizon and within view of the economic global situation that we are currently in. It's further supported by the same effort to converge all accounting standards. All financial reporting would be the same because we have the potential of all financials happening within the same currency. Will the nations of the world develop this single global currency? This presenter thinks that yes, they will, but it's going to take some time. The immense amount of benefits opposed to the minimal costs of the issuance of a single global currency leads me to believe that this will be the situation. It has actually turned me from a skeptic into a supporter. And that concludes the presentation of Unifying the Global Economy. Thank you for watching.